So hello everyone, and welcome to another conversation of the fourth cycle of conversations on corporeal architecture. My name is Maria da Piedade Ferreira, and today I am very happy and honored to welcome Elise Dann. Elise Dann Thank you. Elise Dann was an artist before she became an architect and later a landscape architect. She practiced architecture in historic preservation with her husband, Brian Oxwald, also an architect. After over 20 years as a forensic architect, she is particularly interested in the neuroscience of human perception of space and the built environment. As a continuing artist, she is interested in the neuroscience of all of the senses involved in creative work. Elise, thank you so much for accepting this invitation. I am very much looking forward to this extended conversation because it was a great pleasure to meet you in the summer and to hear very briefly about your work. And already here in the classroom, I was telling to our students just a tiny little bit about it. And I think we will have a wonderful learning session.
Great, wonderful. Okay, as you know, as I think you know, I'm a forensic architect, and I got into forensic architecture by way of being a historic preservation architect for those years where I was constantly analyzing what was wrong with the building. And I just kind of fell into the forensic work, and it really appealed to me, and I've never looked back. I still do small bits of design here and there, but I love the challenge and this aspect of the profession of architecture, which is all about health, safety, and welfare. So I'm going to share the screen. And I think that's it.
We can't see anything just yet, not yet.
Okay, it says hold shift. No. Why is it not? I see where it says Microsoft PowerPoint, but it says unknown.
Oh. I don't know what that means.
It says open system preferences. I wonder if there's a workaround for this. Any suggestions? Because I hit share screen.
I will just pause the recording for a moment. So after a little troubleshooting, now we're ready to start. So we have here the file, share. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, great.
Okay.
Okay, so.
Yeah, so you can say next.
Yes. Next already?
Yeah, well, basically this talk is about where the human body meets the built environment. And so now you can go to the next. So the things that I'll be talking about today are the expectation of a safe built environment and what happens when there's a violation of the expectation that the environment will be safe. I'll also discuss stairs that scare and the functions of handrails and guardrails, and that creativity should be governed by the concern for human safety. Safety enables the enjoyment of the built environment. Next. So pedestrians tend to trust the built environment. Dimensional errors may go undetected because of this. The way that people walk, they usually are looking ahead and at a slightly downward, they're looking where they're going to be walking. They're not looking at their feet. So they don't necessarily see small changes in the environment, like a trip hazard. And for a hazard to exist, it has to be perceived and recognized. So the design conditions that violate a pedestrian's normal expectation are categorized in 4 basic conditions. There's the unexpected impediment, which results in a trip. There's the unexpected level change, such as a single riser step that induces missteps, especially when you approach a single riser step from above, where it's difficult to see there's a change in elevation. An unexpected change in traction, which results in slips. And when you have a trip, you fall forward. When you slip, you fall backwards. An unexpected variation in step geometry. These cause induced missteps. Most incidents that occur on steps occur while you're descending. And these are incidents that result in injuries. It's more difficult to descend a stair than it is to climb a stair. And so that's why we look at especially how to keep a stairway geometry very consistent so that you don't have an induced misstep or a loss of balance. Next. So this is about an unexpected impediment, a tripping hazard. And what we see here is a large concrete deck that's by a swimming pool, and it's used for dancing. And it has pieces of wood that are inserted in the expansion joints. And in the climates that we have in the north of the United States, there's freezing and thawing and freezing and thawing, and it heaves these wooden elements up. Next. And so this one was a little bit over, a hair over a half an inch or 1.27 centimeters. And that is a tripping hazard because your foot, if you're in the swing phase of your gait, the swinging foot is stopped, but the momentum of your body keeps going forward. And so you fall forward. And half an inch is the rule of thumb. If it's under a half an inch, usually you can treat it. There are ways to treat something like that so that it's not a hazard, but it really does become hazardous as soon as it's half an inch. All my clients want to know, the plaintiff clients and the defense clients, is this a tripping hazard or not? And if it's only a quarter of an inch, no, it's not a hazard. Even though you can trip on a quarter of an inch, according to the standards, the standard of care for such changes in level in a walking surface, like on a sidewalk, that's within the margin of error. And the case law in the United States, it says that if it's only a quarter of an inch, the defendant is off the hook, and the plaintiff has, the person who got hurt has no support for his case. Next. Now, this is an unexpected level change. Where that call out says edge of upper landing is located, that is an actual step down. It's unbelievable how invisible it is from above. And this is a photograph taken from below looking at it, which is even more peculiar. So one of the things that you never do is use a striped carpet on a stair, because you will never be able to see where the edge of a step is, with all the stripes, that it becomes camouflaged. So when you approach this is called a short flight stair, you don't see there is actually a step down right there, and then you go down further than you expected, and you lose your balance, and there are a lot of severe injuries that occur from this because people usually break an ankle that requires surgery. I mean, short flight stairs have to be very carefully handled to make them safe. Next. And so this is just illustrating the banana peel effect when you have an unexpected change in traction. It's not that it could necessarily be a slippery surface that you're walking on, but if you've been walking on rough ground and then you suddenly hit a patch of ice, you will slip because of that change. It'll be unexpected if you didn't know that you were about to step on ice. But you can have that also just going from a carpeted area to a highly polished stone floor. The stone floor itself might be adequately slip resistant, but because of the human factors of gait and what you have been doing while you're walking on the carpet, you hit the uncarpeted area and you can lose your balance and slip and fall. Next. All right, so this is an unexpected variation in step geometry where you have a 5 1/4 inch riser at the top and then an 8 inch riser. So this is an instance where someone stepping down from that second floor landing has only 5 1/2 inches that they step down, and that's an acceptable riser height if all of the risers are that height. But then you step down 8 inches, which is almost 3 inches, 2 3/4 inches difference in height, and it's lower. So similar to the unexpected single riser step, an unexpected variation in the geometry like this can also send you into a loss of balance and what we call an induced misstep. It's not a trip, it's not a slip, but it is an induced misstep. Next. So now we come to the handrails on stairs, and the handrails are very important. They don't defective handrails don't cause an incident, an injury on a stair unless they're loose, and you lose your balance from that. But the function of the handrail is to have a surface to slide your hand along to monitor your progress on the stair. And I do that all the time. I'm not grabbing or gripping, my hand is sliding along. Then also a pivot point at switchbacks at landings and at the edges of a stair, the beginning and the end of the stair, to have that to hold on to when you're making those changes. Also, extra support for elderly or infirm stair users. I watched as my mother slowly lost her sense of balance as she aged, and she was very much in need of a handrail. She was afraid of a stair that did not have a handrail. And then the obvious is something to grab during an incident of loss of balance. You can lose your balance for a number of reasons. You could have just stepped on your own shoelace. You could have an induced misstep where you lose your balance. And if you can grab that handrail, you can prevent a fall. But if there's no handrail to grab, then it's a lot more difficult to stop your fall. Next. So we're going to look at some stairs. This one was designed in the 1940s in Las Posas, Xilitla, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, in Mexico by Edward James. This is a beautiful garden, like fanciful environment. There are many distractions. You want to be looking around: birds, wildlife, tropical plants. And there are no handrails or guardrails. To me, this would be a scary place to be. I would love to be standing on a step, and, if I could hold on to something so that I could look around and enjoy what's all around me. But to be on that stair would be all encompassing. I wouldn't be enjoying the place at all, because I'd be concerned about losing my balance and falling. Next. Now, I love this stair. It's a dramatic stairway, which has the experience of compression and expansion. It's controlled. So if you're descending through the dark in compression, followed by an experience of expansion when you reach the verdant valley. In the opposite direction, if you are ascending from the free space of the valley and you are going into that compression, you're feeling a totally different experience, even though it's going into compression versus coming out of compression. And the thing to note here is that there were no handrails during the steepest part of this experience. So yes, there are some handrails, but it could have been safer. Still, I think that it's a wonderful stair. It's just not particularly safe, not as safe as I'd like. Next. This is another beautiful stair. And I ask myself, how can you maintain the sense of grace and beauty while making it safe to ascend and descend? Because it has no guardrail and no handrail. From the ground, you look up and the upper platform feels like it would be a precipice. Do we walk along the top of the wall? What's up there? So while this is a very interesting and beautiful stair from a design standpoint, it's not particularly safe. Next. Now, this is a comparison of two stairs that have this sort of accordion style of construction where you're walking down without a handrail, and on the left side, but on the right side, you have a handrail with a light on it that actually makes that stair so much safer than the one on the left that has no handrail at all and no guardrail. Also, the one on the right, you only are without a guardrail for the last 6 or 7 steps down. It's not the full extent of the stair, which helps make it a little safer. I would still prefer to see some kind of guard rail, whether it's clear with, in order to maintain the design, clear, but with a handrail, that rather than nothing, because just going up and down a stair without a handrail or a guardrail is it's simply not safe. Next. Okay, so this is Huangshan Mountain in China, and this stair is very solid. It's solid concrete construction, so you feel like you're definitely connected to the mountain, and it's not a rickety stair. It does have a guardrail, but there's no top rail. And I would need that little bit of enclosure. You know, I'm sure it's a beautiful view with or without a top rail. I'd prefer to have a top rail so that I don't feel like I could, you know, fall against a thin wire and the wire would break or something like that. It psychologically doesn't feel safe. It may be perfectly safe in terms of the strength of the railings between those concrete verticals. That's just an interesting experience. I wouldn't say that that's dangerous, but it's uncomfortable in terms of feeling safe. Next. Now this one's a beautiful stair, very sculptural, but where is the path of travel? As you notice, these steps go up the sides of the walls and they become part of the ceiling. So where do you walk? It may be obvious if you're there and, you know, there may be a very clearly designated path, but this made me uneasy. And I did want at least a handrail. It wouldn't need any guardrails, but I would be happier if there were a handrail. And there are ways to design something like this where a handrail could actually be a part of this design and be enhancing it. Next. Now imagine if this is a fire exit and you have to get out of the building quickly. And let's just say this is I don't know, I'm sorry, I can't give attributions for every photograph because I got them off of Pinterest and they're not always, you know, properly attributed. So with this one, I can imagine being there for the first time and something happens and everybody has to leave the building quickly, that this would be a real ankle breaker. Just trying to get from that doorway down to ground. I mean, the stair itself is very, very interesting. You feel like you could be dancing on it. You know, it's just got so much wonderful energy to it. But how can it be made safe so that people can get to the ground safely? Next. Now, this is one of the cases that I had where a man was walking up these steps, and the steps were very narrow boards, and they did not overlap. A nosing over the tread below, there was a gap, and you know, with open risers. And what happened is his foot went through the gap, and he broke his femur, and that's a very simple stair that could have been made with wider boards. This is just a basic design decision. Next. Now, this is an interesting stair. When I first looked at it, I was thinking, am I looking up or am I looking down? And I still, looking at this, I see that there appears to be an end of the stair as though we're looking down, but I still am not sure. And because sometimes you'll see underneath a stair, you know, a riser tread on the underside of the stair. So you could be looking at that and be looking up at a ceiling. It's peculiar. Would we want to explore this stair? Call it an amusement ride? Is it safe? I don't know. It does have handrails and guardrails, but it's a confusing environment. to me. It's very interesting. I just don't know if it's safe or not. Next. So this is in Rajasthan, India. It's the deepest stairwell in the world, supposedly. It doesn't have any guardrails except for one to prevent access. It's about halfway down. Do you see the guardrail that prevents people from going all the way down? I believe this was a well, and people would walk all the way down to get their water and then carry their water all the way back up. And these were women, and they had no handrails, no guardrails. It was steep, treacherous. I just can't imagine having to get water that way. Next, yes. Now, this, I wonder, this is fanciful and definitely amusing, but is it real? I think it's probably photoshopped. I tried to research it and didn't come up with anything but this one image. So if anybody knows anything about that, I'd be glad to know. Next. Okay, so this is the Sky Soho showroom in Shanghai by Zaha Hadid. And I think that it's a very sensuous stairway that invites a gracious and graceful descent. I mean, I can imagine just feeling as though I'm beautiful simply by descending this stair. It would make me feel beautiful by being there. Also, this stair has a proper guardrail, and the handrail is graspable. The handrail that's on top of the guardrail is actually a smaller element that you can get your hand around. So I would consider this to be a code compliant and beautiful stair. Next. Now, this is also a code compliant stair. This is the alternating tread stairway. They are permitted by code. They save space. There are some drawbacks, though. Only one person may use the stairway at a time, because if you're going up or down, you want to be using both handrails to manage this. I've been on these. It's not easy the first time because you have to pay attention to the stair to coordinate your gait on the stair with the built condition. You have to, not lose track of which foot is going where. So while these are acceptable, I have a question about how safe they are, again, from a psychological point of view. It doesn't feel safe. It might be safe. It doesn't, to me, even with the handrails, it just doesn't feel safe. That is a bit intimidating to me. Next. So we get to codes and standards. This is an old code from New York City. It's from 1916. I've got a lot of old codes because when you're evaluating a built condition, you don't compare it to current codes because the codes have evolved. So this would be a more primitive code from 1916. And actually, it has all the amendments to 1922. So I would look at this code for a building built in the mid-20s in New York City if I'm evaluating whether or not it was code compliant. Now, it might not be safe, even though it's code compliant, because codes have evolved since then. And things that were allowed way back in the 20s may not be allowed now. But these codes don't stymie design, the modern codes that are in use. They limit injuries through established safety parameters, and they place human safety before design, total freedom. So while it's wonderful to do beautifully creative stairway design, as an example, you do need to make sure that people will feel safe and comfortable using what you designed. Sometimes you're creating, some of these stairs that we've looked at are so extreme in terms of their design exuberance, but they're not necessarily something that a person would feel comfortable using. And I think that was my last slide.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Okay, so I will stop sharing now the screen so we can
Yes.
see it better. Just have to close the window here. Okay, so thank you, Elise, for this really wonderful and really interesting presentation. I think that this whole topic is fascinating because I also teach ergonomics. But I don't, in my own work, I don't have exactly this expertise as you do for so many years, and I really appreciate your contribution because also coming from a standpoint of someone who is also very concerned about human-centered design and how design affects the way we deal with the world and our perception and experience of the world. I find it very interesting that we can learn from you from this perspective of safety, and also that we can understand how important it is to see that design elements really can have serious consequences in our wholeness, in our sense of well-being, and not just physically, but also, as you mentioned in your presentation many times, also psychologically, that just the fact that you're approaching, for example, an unfamiliar environment, and you can find a staircase that you find, you use the word many times, intimidating, or so also this idea of the psychological effect that our environment has and how it impacts how safe we feel, as you appropriately mentioned so many times, but also how free we can feel in such an environment. So I think it's a very interesting way to see how you were mentioning now code in the end and the new code. And very often architects complain that all these rules, they are like corsets and so on, but they can also enable a sense of freedom to the user, because ultimately, if we feel safe in the environment, we're also free to not feel at risk. So I would like to start the first question asking you, how did you get involved with this topic? Was it something that for you personally, you perhaps always felt this way about in connection with the way that you also deal with the environment, or was it a coincidence, professional coincidence?
Well, when I started doing the forensic work, it's like you buy a car that you've never paid attention to before, and suddenly you see that car everywhere. It's like you've studied places where people have been hurt in the built environment, and suddenly I was starting to see it everywhere, and I have fun with that, looking at it, and I always point out, watch your step, there's a trip hazard. And but it's just something that as I proceeded with forensic analysis of the built environment, I started thinking more and more about the human factors that are involved. And it's not just that it's a trip hazard, or that it's an irregular stair or a stair without a handrail or without a guardrail. It's also about people moving through space. And, I studied gait during this time. I've studied various elements about how people fall. With where do things go wrong, and so it's nice to think about what you can do creatively to make a stair that is safe and is still a beautiful stair or an interesting stair. Did I answer the question?
Yes. Well, there are no absolute answers, but yes, you did. One of the aspects I also found very interesting was that you showed many examples of stairs that, for example, I know people who would look at them and would say, that looks like fun, because, they ski and they're very sportive. And for them, this is like the image of having a good time. And I grew up as a very uncoordinated child who felt horrified about many aspects of the world. So many of those stairs for me, I can imagine that they look like fun, but I know that I would not feel much fun experiencing them unless I would have a handrail. So this was also something that I could relate to. And this was what I also found very interesting about your presentation, because you're not presenting like a paradigm to say, this is not how you do a stair. You can do a stair that is fun in this way and challenging and all of that, but you can make it better by adding something that also adds the possibility of support. Because even someone who is more athletic or developed over a lifetime incredible reflexes and so on, there might be a moment for whatever reason that somehow they slip, and it would be nice to have something to hang on to and not having a bad fall. I actually know someone who had such a bad fall and broke a lot of important bones and even had a heart attack afterwards because of the fall. But he did survive because he was a very strong man with a fantastic constitution and was also incredibly lucky. But of course, there are consequences of such an event, long-term consequences. So I find it very interesting that you show that it's important to also think about how we can use this kind of support, not as something that we only get used to always relying on the external support, but to know that the support is there, that this possibility of support is there. And I did not know this example of the staircase you showed from the Zaha Hadid building, but I found it also specifically interesting that you mentioned that one would feel beautiful. You would feel beautiful going down this gentle staircase. And it's wonderful example also of the psychological dimension also of experiencing architecture in a way that makes us feel free and feeling free by feeling safe. So I would also like to ask you, so in your experience of the built environment, do you feel more or less satisfied in general with what you experience from this perspective of forensic architecture?
Well, I'd say that because of my experience with from the forensic point of view, I see everywhere places where people can become injured. And what it does for me is, at least I'm safe. I'm safer because I'm aware. I'm looking for things that could cause me to lose my balance and fall. But in terms of how things are being built now, new buildings, I'd say they are so much safer than they were 100 years ago, when the code requirements were a lot looser. So you don't have nearly the hazardous conditions that you could have had 100 years ago. So I feel very good about the development of the codes. I think that they're helpful. And yes, they do create something that you have to react or respond to. But I look at that in a positive way. It's like I loved adaptive reuse as an architect because I was working with something that was there, and rather than just the white, canvas. And I find having to work with the code in a way frees me up to do designs that I know will be safe because I'm doing it according to the code. But I don't know. It's just a process, the design process, and I have just simply lived long enough that I've grown through various stages in design. And yes, when I was in my 20s, I hated the codes. Yes. Yes.
This is also interesting to learn from this perspective. And I have to think that when, for example, Le Corbusier, and now Le Corbusier, of course, has a very bad name, and he did earn also his bad name, but he was one of the first architects already working with the idea of code and standardization and so on. He was concerned with the human. He didn't concern himself with all humans, but he kind of opened the door for those possibilities. And he talked about code exactly as something that would make the good easy and the bad difficult. That was his vision for the code. So it was probably a little maybe over optimistic and over ambitious, especially at the time. But I still think that we can also look at codes specifically the way you described it, and from this perspective of safety, as something that can also be helpful to guide the designer, or we who are designing, to know that actually if we follow these guidelines, we can do something that doesn't hurt people and that makes their life better. So why would they not be useful? I would like to ask here in the room if there's any questions, because I don't want to occupy all the time only with my questions. So we have already one coming up. Just a few seconds.
Walk forward to the aisle.
Yes.
Hello, it's me again.
Hello.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting and I enjoyed it a lot. At the end, we talked about new rules for architecture, about safety stuff like stairs. I wanted to ask if you don't think that it's more dangerous to give architects more rules because they are effectively more searching for ways around it. So maybe they will create stuff in between where it's a thin line between, oh, it's dangerous, but oh, it looks beautiful. So isn't it counterproductive to give more rules because we effectively take their possibility to be creative and use their fantasy? If you understand me.
Yes, I do. And I don't think so. I remember when the definition of a stair was any level change greater than sometimes it was 2 risers or 3 risers, but and what we did to get around that, the requirements for a stair, is to say, well, if it only has 2 risers, then it's not a stair, and it doesn't have to have a handrail, and it doesn't have to, do this and do that according to the code, because it's not a stair. Well, the code has evolved, so now it defines a stair as any change in level at all, including a single riser step. So a single riser step is considered a stair now. And, that I find very interesting. And I don't consider the evolution of the code as anything that would hold back creativity, because real creativity is responding to the parameters when they are tight parameters. I personally got around the code because I said, oh, well, it's 2 risers. It's not a stair. I don't have to put a handrail there. And yet now you'd have to have a handrail, and you'd have to make that single tread between the 2 risers extra wide so it's more visible. I mean, there are a delineation of the nosings and things like that, things that have to be done to make it safer. And by not having a way out, I think it actually is helpful in knowing that what we are going to be designing will be safe and comfortable for people, because that's what we want, right?
I do agree. We want safety, but it's just my humble opinion. I think that when everything has like a very visible handrail, and maybe it takes away the art from architecture in the topic of stairs. It could be, maybe it
depends.
It depends. Yeah,
It
you can.
depends, because I've seen some beautiful handrail designs that are just so lovely and easy to grasp. Now they're usually expensive because they're handmade or hand wrought, and unique. And so, yes, if you're building with a budget, if you're designing according to a budget and you have to have a handrail and you know that all they are going to want to pay for is a pipe rail, yes, that's not, that I agree with you. It's not good, a beautiful result that you're going to get. So I think what I'm saying is that the codes which provide a minimum requirement for safety, also, if you have a very minimal budget, the fact that at least you are going to have a handrail, and unfortunately you don't have the budget to really design a beautiful handrail, well, at least there's going to be a handrail, and at least it's safe. So there's a trade-off. There's a trade-off, and I do think that some of it is budget driven, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and then maybe the challenge becomes really, how do we make the pipe handrail look the most interesting possible,
Exactly.
even in such a tight situation? And it's also possible to do it.
Mhm.
It's also a trigger for creativity and a trigger for the imagination. That's
Exactly.
where the architecture comes in.
Mhm.
Exactly.
So, and any more questions? There's another one coming up.
I have lots of questions and comments.
Hi, Galen.
Galen, you will have some time. We just have to give priority here in the classroom, and then I will open up to the audience.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, hello. I think your presentation sent me on a trip down the memory lane. Like, where have I encountered dangerous stairs all my life? So I was just thinking about them, and that just got me thinking that, is there any other solution than providing a handrail for safety? Like, for example, you showed us 2 images in your presentation where there were 2 staircases. One had one illuminated handrail and the other didn't have anything. So yeah, it looked very dangerous psychologically. But if you, for example, in the left image, I think if you just increase the width of the staircase, like you make it broader, then would it make it more safer? Also visually and experientially, like, what if you didn't have a handrail, but the dimensions, like the tread could be bigger or the width was bigger, so it became more safe? Just
Yes, I do think that there are ways to make a stair like that safer, and I think making it wider definitely is one of them, because you're going to be hugging that wall as you're going up that narrow stair. I would be anyway. But if it's double the width, I would be a lot more comfortable going up it. But I still like a handrail, because if I'm carrying anything, and I usually am carrying something from one floor to another, or my handbag or whatever, I just like to have a handrail to hold on to, even, if there's no guardrail, at least you're only falling a few feet. You're not falling off of that mountain in China.
Yeah, true. And I just wanted to know if there are any, like I have encountered steps where when I'm descending, it just feels like a sea of steps. There is no landing, there is no handrail. I had encountered that on a hike. So obviously that it wasn't like perfect architecture, but are there any regulations like how much steps do you need? Like how much can a person descend at one time without feeling so dizzy when you're walking downstairs?
Well, that would be an interesting thing to study, actually. So there was one stair that I don't know why I didn't put it in. It was a very wide stair that was very long, just a grand staircase that was outside. And it did have the occasional landing, but it had 0 handrails. And it made me feel like going down that stair, I'd be probably skiing at, at a very high speed, and wanting to go around the moguls. And, I was definitely not afraid, but just thinking that you get going and as you get into your gate, you could start going too fast and then, get ahead of yourself. So,
Yeah.
yes.
The Metropolitan Museum have a lot of stairs.
Thank you so much.
Any more questions here in the room? No? Okay, then I would give the word to Galen. Galen, I know that you're already jumping in your chair over there. But you have to get closer to the computer because I did hear you a few times every now and then, but it was very, very quiet.
Well, I was very quiet because maybe I was muted.
No, I can still hear you, but you need to get closer to your microphone. We hear you, but very silently.
Okay, all right. Let's see. I had such great notes. What the hell did I just do with them? Anyway, just as a first reaction, it doesn't, the question that was just asked about lots of stairs going down, doesn't the Metropolitan Museum in New York have that condition of a lot of stairs going down to the street with no railings?
Well, it does have a handrail. It might have more than one. And I know that when I go, I head for the handrail. But there are usually lots of people, if the weather is nice, lots of people sit on the steps. So as long as there is a handrail, I don't think that it's terrible. You don't have to have a handrail every 8 feet. That would look, that wouldn't look good on the Metropolitan Museum.
Yeah,
But
right.
I feel safe going up and down those stairs when I go over to the handrail.
Okay, so all my careful notes, what did I do? Anyway, so I'll just, first place, I really like what you're saying about this is about how the body meets the environment. And I've never focused on stairs. And I wonder, there is a book, I think an MIT Press book on stairs. Do you have an opinion on that book?
Are you talking about The Staircase by Templar, John Templar?
That's correct, yes.
Yes. That book is an excellent book. It's now, it was written in 1992, so it really someone needs to write a more comprehensive book because there are things that he has missed. Of course, I use his book as a reference a lot. I cite from his work, but there are things that he just doesn't see or didn't see and didn't cover. So, but yes, I would say for the stair, that book is the #1 book to turn to, but it needs someone to write a better one.
And maybe update with all the code stuff. So they're changing codes sounds like it. Does he discuss codes in that book?
No, he doesn't. He might make a slight reference to, whatever the code is in your jurisdiction, but he doesn't talk very much at all about codes. What he's doing is setting a standard by his analysis which is, done very much with the scientific method. I mean, he's citing study after study after study where, the gate was analyzed and cameras were used, and, all these different ways of coming up with the data that he then decides is the safest and most comfortable riser height, the most comfortable tread depth, things like that. And then he'll comment about the codes. I remember back I think it was in the 80s, that the risers and treads were almost every time a new edition of the code would come out, they'd change the riser height again, or the tread depth, or, and it was like, oh, now we have to think of it differently. We have to have a different approach in the design, because now it's instead of a 7.5.
Just lost you. You just froze.
Oh, am I frozen?
Yeah.
You were frozen for some time, and we still, now it's resuming. There must have been something with the connection. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, how much time do we have? If I have several questions that I just want to know which one I'm going to prioritize them.
Okay, well, we have about 10 minutes.
Okay.
And there's a comment still here in the chat that I would also like to bring up. So
All right, I'll say take 3 or 4 more minutes, okay? I hope.
okay, it's okay.
Question about why the staircase where you did every other thing, you said it saved space. It's not, doesn't save in the width, does it?
no, it saves. It saves. It ends up, you can do a steeper stair because the treads are shared. They're so you can make it steeper. You save space horizontally.
Okay, that's what I figured. Then the Zaha Hadid example, I know you want to find something that's really artistic and meets all the codes, but doesn't it have uneven steps?
I didn't see uneven steps, but I did note that the steps were not straight. That they weren't. They had a little bit of a flare, a curve to it, and I looked at that and I thought that could be problematic. But I felt that one of the things that Templar says is that fewer falls actually occur on winding stairs, and that's because people are paying a lot more attention on a winding stair. Okay. So taking that into consideration, I did not think that it was a dangerous, because it was such a gracious, wasn't steep. It was not a steep winding stair. It was a very gracious winding stair.
But you say going downstairs is more dangerous than going up. And I just saw something online. A local architect was doing something about aging in place and saying, have 2 handrails in your staircase. If you had to choose between nosing's another way that you can stop slipping, right? And
yes.
If you had to choose between nosing or a second handrail, which would you do?
A second handrail. And the reason for that is that whatever your preference is, whether you're right-handed or left-handed, you would want to go upstairs holding with your right hand, and you'd want to go downstairs holding with your right hand. So you'd want it on both sides. Okay. And I'm in the process of putting extra handrails in my house. So.
Right. And so, okay, I've asked you about the MIT book. Oh, I thought some of an example might be of interesting to you. So in Sweden, I've seen where there's steps going, let's say, from the street level up to a trail or subway, a train station. If you have a bike or a carriage, the stairs are a pain in the ass. So they have also put 2 tracks beside the stairs, so you can roll your bike up. As you go up the stairs, you can roll your bike on a continuous surface.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Same with baby carriages. So you might want to add that to your talk, some of those images.
The one thing, yeah, I would say the bicycle could work. You don't want to get too far away from the handrail. That's the only problem, you know. And if you're the width of a baby carriage away from the handrail, it's going to be harder to use. You tend to want to hold the handrail with your arm, you know, not too far out away from your body, because that might actually cause you to lose your balance.
Well, then, anyway, I think it's an interesting design
Yeah.
problem you might want to explore. And then I noticed the staircase without the handrails. Is that a Baragon by chance?
I thought it might be. I couldn't find the attribution. It certainly looked like it.
I think because I thought maybe you picked it because we're going to next meet in Guadalajara.
Right.
And so I thought maybe it was just a little comment there. Okay, so you've answered all my questions, but I'm excited to see this work fit into the whole body conscious design worldview. So great, wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Galen. Great questions. It's always wonderful that you came here, and you really enriched also this discussion very much. And actually, I will pick up a comment here in the chat from Margaret Carveca. Margaret, thanks also for being here. She says, not a question, just a thought. You mentioned that we tend to trust the built environment and so are not prepared for error. While natural environments are full of irregularity and error, for example, climbing with irregular gait, and forcing us to be constantly aware of our moving bodies and feeling present. Bringing such experiences from nature to architecture, which can create playfulness and presence, can be appropriate for some spaces, for example, Scarpa, yet our codes mostly allow for constant threads and risers. So what would you comment about this? This is very much in connection with now the stairs that Galen thought maybe was from Bahagan.
Yeah. So that had a couple of questions in it. And so the first question was, I'm just trying to remember. Can you read it back? I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, it was more of a comment. We tend to trust the built environment and so are not prepared for error. Yeah. So
one of the things that Templer, and that's the MIT book that he talks about, is that it's totally different from being on a wilderness trail with lots of tree roots and everything, because when you're on a wilderness trail, you expect there to be tree roots and rocks and ups and downs and all kinds of ways to twist your ankle, you know, and so, you know, you have your walking sticks with you, you know, instead of a handrail, you can at least get a little balance while you're negotiating going down, you know, a real rocky area, and you're keeping your eyes open, looking for the tree roots. And we've all walked on trails with lots of tree roots without tripping because we're paying attention. That's the real difference between the natural environment and the built environment, the constructed environment. And so that's one reason I keep saying the built environment. I'm not saying the environment, including nature, you know, nature trails and gardens and things like that.
Mm-hmm. This is a pretty interesting aspect, because I also think a lot about this topic. Some years ago, I already mentioned this in one of talks a few weeks ago, that I had this design project with students that I asked them to design these mean chairs that were designed on purpose to make the body always alert and keep their balance and so on. And I did this course 2 times, and then we did the tricky tables, which was the logical sequence of the mean chairs. So but it was a fun project also to kind of sensitize to the topic of the whole chair design. And I was very much inspired by Galen's work with chairs. And also, I'm someone who doesn't like to sit for a long time. So I also wanted to work a little bit with this idea. But more recently, actually, I started also to, I was coming from this place of thinking that it's actually very good for our bodies to like rely on our reflexes, and if we're not very good at it, maybe we can develop this self-reliance exactly by not having to rely too much on these things. So don't having to rely on the support. But actually going through all the experience of the pandemic, and because of the psychological effort of, dealing with all the stress and so on, I noticed that I was reaching for handrails and all of these things whenever I saw them. And this was it was a complete change, but it just felt so good every now and then to have the support. I felt like it was really nice that it was there whenever I could reach for them. So I really realized that it's not just that physically, mechanically, I would be able to do it or not. It's also this idea of having something that it's there to support you in different aspects of need. And that was something that really brought that came to my attention, in this process. Also, something I noticed, I'm a left-handed, so I always struggle with the environment since as a child. There are many things which are difficult, and handrails are one of them. So double handrail, of course. What a great idea. I live in a new building now, and I have to go to the cellar to take care of my laundry, which I actually appreciate very much, because then I'm not always thinking that I should take a look at the laundry if I'm at home and so on. But I have to carry these bags with the laundry up. And the handrail is always at the wrong side because I'm a left-handed. So this is also good to think about, maybe making a proposal to adapt our building to make it left-handed friendly. I wanted to ask you, as a left-handed, do you have any knowledge if left-handed people tend to have more accidents because of built environment conditions? Just as a curiosity.
I don't remember any studies about right-handed versus left-handed. So there may have been some studies, but none that come to mind. And there aren't standards like, I don't know of any standard that says provide handrails on both sides because of right and left-handedness.
Well, I would say that probably left-handed people are already so used to adapting to the right-handed environment that we kind of already developed a way to cope with it. Although I would say that as a reflex, this with the handrail specifically, I always tend to go with the left hand first, because of course it's the dominant hand and the instinct hand. So I would just give room for one more question from the audience, if there would be. Perhaps? No? Okay, so we'll finish for now because we're also a little over time here in the classroom. Elise, thank you so much again for this really, really interesting talk. I imagine that it would be great fun and really wonderful to continue and learn from you and with you, but we will hopefully have another chance in the future. So thank you so much for your time and for sharing your knowledge with us. And thank you also.
It was really fun.
Great. And thank you also, Galen, and everybody else in the audience for joining us. So have a great day or a great evening. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.